Okay, so welcome everyone to another Takdir Dialogos session with Samantha Taroni and Robert Hutchinson, my friends and colleagues, collaborators in these journeys of exploration and mutual transformation in our conversations. So today we are talking about what is wisdom. And here you see that we are taking a perspective that draws on the Enneagram, Egyptian philosophy, and traumatology. And then Sam's going to be leading us in a practice. So let's just open for you guys to introduce yourselves briefly, and then we can get going. I know people have met you in previous sessions, but just a brief one.
Sure. Would you like me to go first, Rob?
Yes, go ahead, Sam.
Okay, so my project is called The Soul Shed, and it's exploring intuitive creativity and our access to a kind of inner wisdom stream. So the lens I bring to this will be an experiential one to offer you a chance to try out a bit of intuitive creative practice and see what it offers you in terms of a sense of a coherent inner source of wisdom.
Wonderful, thank you. Rob?
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I'm Robert Hutchinson. I'm a coach and Enneagram practitioner, and my project is called Pesedjet, and that is ninefold wisdom of Egyptian philosophy. And the reason that I work with that is to discover more wisdom through the ancient Egyptian system, but very much rooted in now. There's a big crisis in the world globally, many levels, and what I want to do is bring ancient wisdom, particularly through the lens of Enneagram and Egyptian philosophy, and embed it very practically in the here and now, so that we can be more balanced in the way that we operate as an individual person, but also as groups and societies as well. So that's my project, is Pesedjet, and you can find me for that on Substack.
Thank you, Rob. That's great. Okay, so let's have a quick look. Whoops. Sorry, I have lost my connection to my slides. Okay, there we go. I'll have to edit that little piece out. Okay, so let's have a look at the Enneagram. So from an Enneagram perspective, the Enneagram offers us a meta map, or a map of maps. And many of you who've been in my courses or in talks will have seen this metaphor and seen some version of this image, which represents that each of us have a different map of the world, and our Enneagram type, tri-type, instinctual sequence is quite a good way of describing our map of the world, because it helps us to understand our preoccupations and the things that we consider important. So if we've got self-praise dominant, then we're paying attention to self-praise things. We're paying attention to resources, structure, the home, security, those kinds of things. And if we've got self-praise blind, then those things will be off our map. So our Enneagram type is a kind of map, and along with that map goes a strategy for how to navigate it. So that's the foundation for Enneagram thinking about what wisdom is. And you can possibly guess where I'm going with this, is that these maps are partial. And if we are planning to do something, or if we have a problem to solve, a very restrictive and narrow map that confines our thinking to one groove, or only allows in one set of variables, or only certain kinds of information, then we're going to have a very restricted foundation for adapting and making those decisions and thinking flexibly. So the meta of the maps works very well for me and for my clients too, especially in corporates, to bring across this idea that we are operating with a very partial view of the world. So for me, wisdom, according to the Enneagram, involves broadening of perspectives. So anything either of you want to say there, Sam or Rob, before I go to the next slide?
I'm happy to jump in there. Yeah, the way that I look at this is I often see wisdom associated with 0.5 on the Enneagram, and I think wisdom is a quality of the whole Enneagram. It's a quality of the whole system. So the way that I'd like to think about the wisdom of the Enneagram is that the wisdom is the combination of all of the virtues together, operating in harmony and operating as a unified system. And that's really what the wisdom of the Enneagram is talking about. So it's not a quality I would limit to 0.5, but it's a quality that I would apply to the whole Enneagram as a whole.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's really important. It reminds me of something Richard Rohr said about some contemplative monks. And he said, you think you're wise and enlightened, you're just Enneagram 5s. So I think your point is so important, so that the outward kind of associations we have with wisdom are, maybe reservation and silence. But 5s are not doing that because they're wise. They're doing that because they're dissociated. So thank you for making that point. Definitely, wisdom is not one type. At our average levels of health, none of us are wise. Sam, is there anything you want to say?
Yeah. That's interesting that each type may have a particular relationship to imagining their access to wisdom and what kind of wisdom that they have or not. And there's a kind of, I think the Enneagram journey invites a kind of deeper self-connection and self-remembering that becomes less about being identified with a persona and more about being connected with presence to life unfolding. And my sense of each type in terms of its kind of unfolding self-connection is that each type brings a different piece along to the party in terms of knowledge and wisdom, and you'll have a different perspective brought to bear on life unfolding. So we all kind of come to play a part in that. The more present we can get and more softened to these identifications and ideas about ourselves, the more they fall away, the more we can kind of perhaps show up in a way that's really kind of true to what we actually know.
Wow, that's really lovely, especially that metaphor of softening. I find that a very powerful metaphor, given that our Enneagram types are, easily conceptualized as resistances to unfolding in the here and now. Rob, you nodding. What's your sense of that and what Sam just said?
Yeah, and what comes up for me is both the individual journey of navigating all of the 9 parts within us and balancing the 9 parts, the access to all 9 parts, but then also collectively, and this is where kind of part of my passion is about how we can collectively run countries, organizations, the planet better, because we're going to have to do that very, very soon. So collectively, the idea of the round table rather than the oblong board table, of having all of the parts with a stronger voice around the table of businesses, of governments, of any collective, so that it's not just as it is right now, the most assertive, the most extrovert that get the people that shout loudest that get on TV and become politicians, etc., and running businesses as well in ways that are harmful to individuals in the organizations and harmful to the environment as well. So that's something that on an individual and a collective level, we're going to need to be looking to models like the Enneagram to help us better navigate our own landscape and the landscape around us, whether it's social or the environmental landscape as well.
Wow. Yeah, that's so valuable. I'm definitely going to bring that metaphor into my corporate work of the oblong board table versus the Enneagram symbol, and what is the difference between a rigid hierarchical structure which has no sacred geometry in it. You'll never find a rectangle in sacred geometry. And then the Enneagram, which illustrates so much dynamism and balance and movement and inclusivity, and every single part is part of an unfolding of one of the laws. I really love that that's come up, because I think it's a very incredibly generative comparison.
How would board meetings be different conducted around a round table?
100%.
Fascinating just to even think about the symbology of that.
Yeah. And when I do corporate team interventions, I've learned the hard way, but I now make sure they know my room setup, which is a circle of chairs with nothing in the middle, because that's where I put the Enneagram mat. And there are no tables. And if you don't tell them that, they'll give you a room either with a big boardroom table, or it'll be like a lecture style where, you know, this is supposed to be a team session, but there are rows of people sitting there facing a screen. Like, it's so strange that there are these implicit ways of thinking that set up a certain dynamic. Yeah, and linking that back to the topic of wisdom, the wisdom of inclusion of various voices and perspectives. I do sometimes do that as well with corporate clients. I say, okay, let's take a business problem that you're currently facing. Like they want to expand internationally, or they want to start a new research and development arm or something. It's okay, let's throw that problem into the middle of the mat and then look at it from all these different angles. And I'll help them to formulate which question each type would answer. Like the Enneagram 8 would be, why wasn't this done yesterday? And, you know, and we go around. And, but also the high end of each of the types, not just the caricature. So I find, yeah, that as a metaphor is very, very powerful.
I love the wisdom of inclusion as you're talking about that, you know, and that's just being, it's being diminished, isn't it? In the States, it's being diminished here in the UK. There's a move away from diversity and inclusion. And whatever your politics, you know, it can be about politics, but it's also about a wise system. That's what the research around diversity and inclusion says, is that businesses run better, they're more profitable, they're more effective, they're more productive when there are different voices in the room.
Yeah.
You know, and just moving to this one size fits all that you know that's happening, especially in the States right now, is once again not aligning with the wisdom of inclusion.
Not at all. Yeah, and if you think about it, like the exclusion just leads to rigidification of one way of thinking, which is really what we're seeing. And I just want to bring up this the slide on the development of our Enneagram types, which speaks to the rigidity of our style. I know this is a very complex slide with a lot on it, but what it basically illustrates is that we're born with self-affirming instincts and natural organic desire and a sense of, embodied developing autonomy that comes from being in our own body and having needs and impulses. And those are self-affirmed by a child. And then because of the developmental context and the deficits in the early holding environment, some of those instincts are either negated, thwarted, or those needs very neglected. And because of the intense emotion that goes with that, the intense negative affect, we have a natural reaction to those, which leads to our Enneagram type adaptations. So this is really a schematic representation of Naranjo's teaching. So we get certain suppression and exaggeration, like the exaggeration of our toughness and aggression, or the suppression of our assertiveness, in which case we become, fawning and placating and compliant. So each Enneagram type describes an adaptation, and it includes workarounds and making the best of what we've got as a child. And as part of that, part of us goes missing. So these parts of ourselves that go missing are the exiled parts. They're amputated or traded in parts of ourselves that we couldn't afford to express. Like for sevens, couldn't really afford to be in the here and now with a sensitive heart because of the pain of the deficits, the lack of support and guidance, the lack of care for the needs. So every Enneagram type has the adjustment process that leads to a disconnection from certain parts of themselves. So it's kind of the diversity and inclusion is an inner phenomenon as well, that we want to include all of the high end of the different types within ourselves, the sensitivity, the care, the heartfulness, the depth, the orientation towards achievement, the focus and depth. So I'm just naming some of the attributes of the different types. But this sense of diversity and inclusion within, I also am enjoying, the link that what you're saying has given rise to in my mind. And then, I don't know, let's go back there. Anything you want to say or comment on about this picture, this slide? No, it's quite a lot to take in.
There's a lot there. But yeah, diversity and inclusion within, that really is getting towards this idea of wisdom that we're here to talk about.
Yeah.
And diversity and inclusion within is not a big noise and a big energy and a big, it's really coming back to those three qualities of stillness, solitude, and silence. And that's where we find the diversity within, because diversity needs space, right? We can't find the diversity and inclusion within when we've got a lot of overexcitement of the nervous system going on. So we must regulate to open up that space for stillness, for solitude, and for silence, to find space for, especially for the parts that are less well heard within our own system, within our own Enneagram system.
That's very, very cool. If we think about it as kind of if we're standing in the middle of the Enneagram and we're constricted and we only have access to our own type, that as we relax and expand our awareness, we can include the other types and the other parts of ourselves, archetypal parts that are disowned. Yeah. So I'm going to quickly sum up my piece here. I mean, I could go on for many hours about this, but just to highlight John Vervaeke and Daniel Siegel's views on wisdom here, tangentially that link in, that John Vervaeke speaks about a salience landscape, which is the wisdom of knowing what's important in the here and now. What is it important to notice? What is it important to focus on? what are the rules of the game, and what intuition is available. So really being able to look at what's here, in the here and now as important, and establishing a fittedness of my coping strategy and an optimal grip, which means that I'm actually acting in the here and now on the basis of what's here. I'm not defending against the past. I'm not projecting. I'm not operating in a fantasy. I'm actually here. And that involves being fully embodied and embedded in the here and now. That's 4E cognitive science, is about our embodiment, our embeddedness. I'm not going to go into the other E's. And there are different types of knowing that come into that, as well as what he calls recursive relevance realization, or reflexive relevance realization, to be able to stop and think, am I thinking about this situation correctly? So it's about taking our rationality and applying it to the problem of a good use of our rationality. So to be able to slow down and saying, wait a minute, am I using my faculties? And that includes intuition. It's not just logic. It's about saying, whoa, wait, space, time, solitude, silence, stillness, to be able to say, this is my feeling, this is my gut instinct, this is my intuition, this is my rational mind, and being able to slow things down in order to be able to reflect on our way of engaging with reality. And then Daniel Siegel speaks about 9 domains of integration. And if you read about those, you can really see how they are important for wisdom, because he speaks about our optimal state in integration. We have qualities of what he calls phases, the acronym for we are flexible, we're adaptable, we have a sense of coherence within us, which is another word for kind of congruence in our organization, sense that we can kind of stand our ground here and now with a sense of that inner congruency. And then we are energized because of the fact that our energy is not leaking out through maintaining a billboard image or worrying, oh dear, Rob, what are you thinking about me? Do you like me? That's energy leakage. And then we have stability, which is not static and not rigid, but it is a sense of a groundedness. And it builds in a kind of stretchiness, which is one of my preferred ones for the S's. So that's more of a cognitive science and interpersonal neurobiology perspective on wisdom. So it is very much linked to what you were saying, Rob, that when we can create space within and be calm and regulated and integrated, then wisdom will be a natural quality of including these different intelligences that we have, what I like to think about as sentiences, sentience of the body, the heart, the mind, and being able to tap into all that wisdom, that knowing, experiential knowing to decide. So anything you want to say about that before we get into the Egyptian philosophy piece?
I love the idea that in any group situation that there will be other people there who are noticing different pieces. And I love the possibilities that emerge when a group of people that are really quite different from one another are all given that kind of space to bring their piece. And that takes a kind of an openness, but also a kind of trust that there are things there that I don't know yet and somebody else will. And so there's something in that about trusting the whole is bigger than the sum of its parts, that there's things that can kind of come out of collaboration and conversation and meetings. But also there's in that built in a kind of an understanding that pacing also is a quality that needs to be allowed to find itself. Our friend Cece often talks about how much she likes being in spaces where there are fours, fives, and nines with drawn types, because they will naturally slow something down and stop the thing rushing itself through if they are truly included in what's happening. And I think that's brilliant. Cece identifies as an 8, and so her movement to action is really quite a very strong, direct line. But to be able to sort of create a space of understanding that that's not truly inclusive, if you need to instantly get to the point of action without allowing for the other qualities of intelligence, sensitivity, depth of knowledge, perspective, all these other pieces. If those aren't in the room, then the kind of the round table, if you like, isn't being truly honored. So yeah, I loved that idea of pacing and relationship to time being something that needs to be included too. So I'm very much appreciative of these kind of spaces where there is a sense that there are 3 people here that are having 3 different realities interfacing, and what happens when we allow those to kind of, meet one another. I find it exciting.
Yeah, me too. And also acknowledging really that it's not 3 realities bumping up against each other and us like, oh, I'm learning about Sam's reality. What's actually happening is my reality is being changed. Like, as I hear how you perceive the world, I perceive it differently just by entering into your lens. That's that thing of seeing as becomes being as. And as we discover each other's ways of seeing, we change. It's quite miraculous. So, yeah, thank you. Rob?
Yeah, that interaction of energies and the 3 and the 3 is, kind of segues neatly into what I've been writing around this week, which is the concept of Egyptian Ma'at. And it really is, for people who know about the Enneagram and the law of 3, it's the law of 3 expressed in Egyptian terms, which is that truth is threefold. And when we get a twofold truth, we can start to go head to head. And it's when we get a threefold truth that we can start to perceive with greater perspective and wisdom, if we're talking about that in the session today. When we get 2 truths, we're head to head, and no one wins in a two truth situation. And a 2 truth situation is rarely, if ever, an accurate picture of what's actually happening. And we need that third point, which is the point of truth, or the point of wisdom, if you like, to have the perspective to actually see what's going on for real. Yeah. So I can show a slide for that. Might be quite nice. So this is from a post that I put up this week, and we did a session on it a few weeks ago as well. So we're looking at this word here, which is ma'at, the Egyptian idea of truth, harmony, balance, and it's very central to the whole Egyptian worldview and philosophy. Is that we seek balance, and it's you can say the Egyptians were simple, or you can say they were incredible geniuses. My view is, if you look around yourself with a bit of wisdom and a bit of intelligence, you can soon see that a system seeks balance. So it's not exactly the idea, the philosophical idea or the observation that is so genius, but what is genius is that they put it so centrally in their culture and in their worldview. And that's something, again, that we're missing in our world. We can call from them this idea of threefold truth, being central to any system. Any ecosystem has to seek equilibrium. It seeks balance. It's the way of nature. So as long as you're on this kind of line here between the polar line at the bottom here of the triangle of the pyramid, you're just bouncing back along this this line between polarization. And it's this point here, the vertical point, that adds the dimension, adds the perspective. So whenever you're stuck, whenever you've got a problem, think about what's the third force, what's the third perspective, what's the third eye, if you like, that I'm not noticing, that I'm not seeing about that. So what is there anything there that's of interest for either of you to pick up on?
For me, what immediately jumps out is the fact that we've got two lines going from our type and two wings. So whatever dilemma we're facing, we've automatically got three things, two sets of three to consider the problem from that perspective. Like as a 7, I've got aligned to two of the competency types, the 1 and the 5. So what does a competency experience of this situation or dilemma look like? And then I've got the 8 and the 6, which are both emotional realness types. So, you know, I've got access to everything. And then what would the 6 do? What would the 8 do? What does inner authority look like? What does innocence and soft-heartedness look like? So being able to balance the high end of these things in any situation for me is the immediate Enneagram applicability for anyone. Like I was working with an Enneagram 1 this morning, and she was feeling a lot of internal pressure to conform to an outer authority's prescription. I was like, okay, well, think about the fact that you've got a line to 7 and a line to 4. Those are the two most rebellious types on the entire Enneagram. So what do they say about you being forced into this prescriptive, narrow little box? Neither of them are interested in that. So it was quite an interesting conversation. So I'm just like really seeing how this is manifest in our place on the carpet.
Yeah.
Sam?
Yeah, I love that. I was thinking something similar recently, exploring point 2 on the Enneagram and recognizing that 2 is there's been a journey from 8 to arrive at 2, and then 2 can continue on a journey towards 4. And this idea of a journey, I like that. I love the movement that's built into the symbol, and you can see it in Rob's slide. You know, there's this journey towards the pyramid, as if there's an expectation that by going on this journey, you'll arrive somewhere that will change you. And then when you get to the place and you recognize you've been changed, you continue, and there will be another place that changes you. And a little bit later in the session, I'm going to show you a slide of a picture that was conceived in really ancient times. Again, it's from a Siberian, I believe it's a Siberian cave painting, but it's showing a journey, a human journey from earth to spirit. And it's very much got these points that you arrive at, and you can see in the way that it's conceived. I'm building it up now into a bit of anticipation, but you'll see what I mean, in that it's taking you through a series of thresholds, and I think that that's what the Enneagram can offer us, just by these places having these archetypal pieces of wisdom to be discovered in them.
Mm.
Well, that's powerful. To think that this wisdom consciousness has been mapped for generations and generations, and that we are in a line of transmission of ancient awareness. And there's this one Buddhist prayer that speaks about bodhicitta, which is basically consciousness. And it says, may it arise in places where it isn't, and may it remain and grow stronger in places where it is. And from what you're saying, I just get that sense of wisdom as the expansion and growth of awareness that exists, and other people knew it in the past, and we have access to it.
That links really nicely with this idea that I'm kind of developing, which is I was trying to define wisdom. So from the idea of ma'at, balance in ancient Egypt, and other many other traditions as well, there's this idea of tradition, and that's kind of, I think, what you're talking about, Ingrid, isn't it? And yeah, this is not blind tradition. It's not dogma. But I think this is something that we really miss in our culture right now, is the tradition of the errors and learning through trial and error of the ancestors, of the people who have gone before and have left this great body of wisdom. And it's kind of, you know, the established religions don't deliver this. And then we're left to go into this kind of world of, you know, of self-help and etc. and spirituality, which again can work and cannot work. You know, we don't have a kind of containing vessel of the sum of the knowledge of ancestors or people that have gone before that made the mistakes that we're making and realized the error of their ways, and put together through Egyptian philosophy, through many other philosophies as well, put together these wisdom traditions that have been blown apart in the last 2000 years, really. But there are enough pieces around us to put them back together. That's what really excites me about this work.
Yeah, that's worth a lot of reflection, especially in the light of, for me, like California religions, you know, like new religions.
Yeah.
Not to diss California, it's been a portal for so many things, but there's also a lot of commercialization of spirituality, and
spiritual bypass is where, you know, that's where that concept comes up. So there's something about wisdom which has to be linked in some kind of tradition. We can't make it up in this lifetime ourselves. That's the point I think I'm trying to make here. There has to be balance.
Yeah, we can't make it.
Yeah, go on, Ingrid.
No, I just love that. We can't make it up now, out of nowhere.
No.
It's in a transmission.
Yeah. And the more we're out of balance, the more we're not going to be aligned with wisdom. And the more we're disconnected, the more that we're going to be out of alignment. So that's where I get this kind of equation. Wisdom is tradition, balance, and connection. And you know, collectively and together, I think, you know, that really excites me. And if we can work towards that, then that's what I'm here for. Yeah, and then just I picked out a couple of words for wisdom. If you look into Egyptian, there are many words for wisdom in the Egyptian language and many ways of talking about it, which is also really interesting. So we've got this kind of traditional idea of wisdom. Just to point out that it's to do with speech as well. So he's pointing at the seated figure pointing at his mouth is highlighting speech, which comes up a lot in the Egyptian. There's this other idea which is a result of through perception. We can talk of knowing myself in my heart. That's another way in Egyptian of talking about wisdom. And Arek Ab as well is a fourth way of talking about heart-based connection to wisdom. So we haven't got time to go into that in detail today because we're going to have to move towards sound. But just really the point of that is the different perspectives on wisdom that come up in a philosophy such as Egyptian. So is there anything to pick up on there, or we're happy to hand to Sam?
I just wanted to ask you, Rob, about the branch that's
Yeah.
in the bottom there.
Yeah. So that's the word chet here, which is as a result of or to follow on from. And yeah, I love the fact that there's a branch of a tree there as part of the word, which is it's very visual that the branch is branching out. We've got the legs here define motion. So it's a determinative of motion. So we've got this very active principle idea brought across in the imagery there, haven't we? And of course, the wisdom of a tree as well is very much kind of associated there by association.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah,
Ingrid, I cut across you then.
No, just the power of that we get wisdom by moving forward and perceiving, and then our consciousness kind of branches out through our encounter with reality. That it's so dynamic and alive and organic. There's a lot in there.
They're endlessly fascinating to actually look at the actual hieroglyphs and what they actually mean.
Yeah.
This one is a fringed piece of cloth, which brings an association with a veil as well, something that you might see partially through or not see partially through. There's something hidden about that as well, isn't there? That association with a fringed piece of cloth.
To me, it brings up the Jewish prayer tallis, and
yeah.
Ceremonial things like that. These fringed garments, often religious type of things, might be something to do with teachings that are handed down in a lineage. That's kind of my association. I would remember that as a mnemonic.
Yeah.
But I think that point you're making, when I see the word tradition, I get suspicious.
Yeah.
To me, it symbolizes kind of dogma and static rules. But I guess the way that you emphasized it, for me, then it's more the line of transmission of awareness and insight.
And I think the reason for that is that our traditions are so muddled up and scrambled up right now that we don't understand the positive benefit of a tradition. It's kind of seen as something old-fashioned or not helpful or dogmatic. We don't see the benefit of a genuine tradition because they're very, very few and far between right now in the world that we live in.
And if we think about it in terms of indigenous traditions,
exactly.
If you think about ceremonies of death as a tradition, like I was reading about the Lakota funeral ceremony.
Yeah.
It's so mind-blowing and profound. It's not it's nothing like a Western funeral formula. It's so, yeah, I reckon I would have to put in parentheses there something to remind me of the sacredness and depth that is carried through within traditions.
Yeah, and ritual and sacred are absolutely associated and included in that tradition there.
Awesome. I wish we could go into each of these hieroglyphics.
Yeah, maybe another time.
Yeah.
So Sam.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I think that there is a flow between what you've just been talking about and what I'd like to share, because I think this sense of there being perhaps an underground wisdom stream that is connecting humanity, and is expressed differently by different cultures at different times, and that we perhaps have associated now knowledge with the external manifestation of institutionalized kind of wisdom, when there's this underground thread that's continuous and differently expressed. And I hope that, well, I'm going to show you this slide now. I really want you to have eyes on this and to hear what you make of it, because I'd love your brains to connect with it very much. So let me just go to this slide here. So this is the image I was talking about earlier, which is from very ancient expression from Siberia, I think a cave painting, and it has been interpreted as a diagram of the shaman's journey from the earthbound world to the heavenly level. But this sense of there being a journey that begins and goes through a series of places, of stop-off points, of kind of thresholds, perhaps. I find it really a thing of wonder that this was conceived as this journey from the earth to the heavenly realms. And when we think about lots and lots of spiritual traditions and the iconography and the imagery that depicts a spiritual journey, I would, before I go into the practice that I would like to offer, which is going to be one of connecting with a tree that so a different way of doing life. I would just really love to hear what you make of this imagery.
So what I'm seeing is a backwards 2. I'm seeing some potential shock points here and here, or where the straight line deviates, and then this beautiful curve. I think there are 9 steps there between at the start of the curve going around, and there's something about duality down at the bottom, those 2 blocks. That's what's coming up for me.
Yes. And it looks like a little dog or a little four-legged
deer
at the bottom.
There's a fox or something down there, isn't there?
Yeah.
Jehuti. No, it's Set.
Set, yeah. Or
The instinctual,
Anubis, maybe.
The duality.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, the part that stands out is there's a gate that you have to get through to get onto the path at all. And it looks like a fire. And you're not going to get onto that path unless you want to get away from that fire. So it's like in order to change and grow, you need to have some kind of burning platform of discomfort in order to get you going on the path and to look for a, like, this is very uncomfortable. My life has become unmanageable. I've got to do something. And that being the beginning.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I asked you both if you would bring a photograph of a tree that you know. So if you could have that to hand, in a moment I'm going to flip to a photograph of a tree, so anyone who's watching who'd like to go along with this little journey can be warmly invited to do it in real time. But also, of course, you could pause the recording and find a photograph of a tree that you would really like to work with. And it's known to you already, if you happen to have photographs of trees on your phone. So a tree that you know a little bit and you have a little bit of a timeline with. And if it's one in your square mile, so one that you pass in your daily life, that's perhaps going to give it more meaning to you as you kind of go on after the practice. And what I'm going to invite, I've come up with seven kind of stations that we could perhaps imagine as places to arrive and just explore knowledge from. And those are arriving, witnessing, seeing, feeling, loving, knowing, and acting. And so I'm going to invite you in a moment to have a kind of a correspondence with the photograph and the tree, the imaginal kind of version of the tree that you can kind of bring up and conjure in your mind's eye, in your heart's eye, in your bodily kind of visceral memory of it, and just to explore it from those places, and then to do a little bit of journaling from there. And I'm just going to, before we go into that, I'm going to just offer you, if you like this kind of thing and you want to follow it afterwards, you can check out my project, The Soul Shed, by having a look at my Substack at Samantha Taroni 1, and their publication is The Soul Shed. So here are 2 chestnut trees in wintertime. And if you need a tree to explore, you might like to choose one of those. But if you have a tree of your own from your own square mile, that will be more meaningful for you. So what I'd love you to do is to just feel into a sense of arriving with your tree. So settling into your own body a little bit more than you have been. Perhaps you've been listening carefully and you've neglected to just be witness to your embodied self here and now, wherever you are. And coming into your own embodied self and your own human way of doing life gives you the opportunity to consider that there are other beings doing life differently, and a tree is one of those. So in finding your contact boundary, the place that you can experience another way of doing life from, whether it's another human or indeed a tree, just find yourself at that place of contacting. So you're arriving in yourself here. You're coming to your point of contact. And then from there, I'm going to invite you just to witness the tree in the image. And just notice how it is doing life. Notice its place in the world, where it's living from. Notice its attitude to life, something about its posture, its character, its way of meeting the moment, meeting time and meeting you right now. And feel what it is to witness another way of doing life. And be witnessed by another way of doing life that shares some things with us. It shares a vertical axis, a sense of being connected to the earth. It shares having limbs that reach outward. It shares a kind of a growth and expression upwards and outwards, and downwards and inwards into a sense of rootedness and capacity to draw from the earth and to give back to the earth. And then as you just allow that witnessing to kind of step back slightly so that you can take in all of it, just allow your eyes to wake up a little bit more and see the tree a little bit more, and allow a little bit more of you to be in that seeing, so that you're noticing qualities of the tree. You're allowing it to communicate something of its essence with you. And as your eyes wake up in that way, allow feelings to come into you, to move through you. And as the other way of doing life of the tree inspires some feeling in you, maybe some emotion, some sense of being changed a little bit by this contact moving through you. Just check in with your heart now and see where your heart can connect with your mutuality of being, your sharing of the planet with this other way of being that is doing its being. It is living alongside you in your square mile, close to where you are. And allow kinds of knowing to emerge from that. Just a solidity and a grounded sense of what that means to be living alongside such a being. And notice how there are ways that knowing might also inspire you to act or behave. Perhaps there might be something that you are moved to do as a result of arriving with this tree with yourself and witnessing this tree, seeing it, feeling it, perhaps your heart being moved by it, knowing it a little more. And then from all of that, that whole kind of experiencing of all of that, I'd like to invite you just to allow the tree to offer you some words by way of connecting with you in your language. And we're going to do a little bit of journaling connected with the soul collage process, where you ask the being that you're encountering, who are you? And it answers in its words, I am one who. And see what this tree would like to say in answer to the question, who are you? I am one who. And then the question, what are you here that I can know? What are you here that I can know? And allow the tree to tell you, I am here that you can know. What does the tree want you to know? Maybe very simple, something very simple and direct, or it may be something completely unexpected. And then in this encounter, what are you here that I can love? What does the tree want you to love? And then finally, what are you here that I can do? Is there something that the tree wants you to do as a result of meeting with it today? So if you're watching on the recording, just to summarize that, asking the tree, who are you? And letting it reply in its own words. Asking the tree, is there something it wants you to know? Is there something it wants you to love? Is there something it would like you to do? And then when that's complete, in whatever way it came, in whatever way it was, just to have an inner gesture, a moment of appreciation for these amazing beings that we share time and place and the earth with. And that's the little practice of inner knowing that I wanted to offer you today. So I don't know if there was anything in there that is for sharing, Ingrid and Rob, or anything in there that connects with these different ways of knowing and what we've been talking about today, but just to have a couple of moments perhaps to reflect.
I love the experience of different being. That for me was a really nice way to. It was a lovely concept, and through the tree, that was a really great way to bring a sense of that, bring a felt sense of that, experienced sense of that.
Mm. Yeah, there's a lot. There must be surely so many different ways of knowing when that we share life with so many different ways of being. It makes it does open up the fact that we can get quite narrow about what knowledge is.
And that's the point of wisdom that we've been talking about, isn't it? And non-human wisdom is just as important as human wisdom.
Yeah, the integration, like you were saying there, Sam, that there are different ways of knowing. It's not just different perspectives, like different maps of the world. There are also different ways of knowing, different ways of making maps, and intuition is one of them that we draw on strongly in this process that you just did. And I was having a conversation earlier today with Petra Bongarts, and I said to her, "So what's wisdom?" And she said, "Knowing what's not needed" was one of her definitions, which I really liked. And yeah, in this process, just that sense of, my tree was saying quiet, quiet, quiet. And we don't need that much, no, to find wisdom. Like Rob was saying earlier, the silence and the stillness is where we find the capacity for other forms of knowing and other ways of seeing, to find space within us. And I wrote earlier as well that wisdom is the integration of intuition and rationality. And I see the process that you just did as well as it's very, very integrative of left brain and right brain and somatic and narrative, Dan Siegel's 9 domains of integration. There's so many of them that are taking place tacitly in your process. And just the proof of the integration is in the state change. Like coming through that process, just feeling such an ease of being and relaxation and receptivity to other forms of knowing.
Thank you. And thanks for, doing it and giving witness to the experience of it a little bit. And no, I know it's possible that there are people who may have tried it who are watching the recording, and of course you'd be very, very welcome to share anything you would like to in the comments, or to connect with the work that the three of us are doing, that Ingrid's doing at Tack Deer and Rob's doing at Pesedjet and I'm doing at the Soul Shed, because it's community, is what we are wanting to offer, spaces and places where we can explore these things together, because we want to offer spaces where people can conceive of imaginative ways to be part of perhaps helping the world to unfold in some ways that include these kinds of knowledge and possibilities.
Cat knowledge and tree knowledge. Yeah.
Yes. Sausage agrees with this. I'm sure of it.
Of course. Yeah, thank you so much for that, my friends. Yeah, really beautiful. Makes me think the definition of wisdom is sensitivity.
Mm.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I'm going to stop
Thanks,
the
Debbie.
recording there. And yeah, subscribe to the channel if you want to keep up to date with these monthly offerings. Anything you want to add, Rob, in farewell?
No, just thanks to both of you for being here today. And I felt like we just scratched the surface today. There's a lot more that we could have said and done. So maybe this is a subject we come back to again at some point.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, but yeah, otherwise, bye from me.
Thank you. Ciao.